Throughout history, there are some groups of people that have gained a fearsome reputation for being combative. Their experience and competence on the battlefield gives them a distinct advantage in being able to establish their own kingdoms. However, the longevity of their imperial project cannot be sustained by martial prowess alone. This is where statecraft, bureaucracy, and infrastructure come in. Unfortunately, this is the realm in which these warrior cultures often lacked. The Afghan Durrani Empire was a key example of this situation. Established in 1747 by Ahmad Shah Durrani, it set a strong early precedent of launching invasions into India in order to gain loot that could be used to enrich the Afghan Empire. In the process, the foundation was set for the modern nation-state of Afghanistan. Nevertheless, the fragile infrastructure of the Durrani Empire condemned it to come crashing down within 50 years of Ahmad Shah's death.
Before we continue, let me tell you about today's video partner, NordVPN. Staying safe online is a key daily concern for all of us, especially since scams and phishing attacks are on the rise. I'm sure we've all been browsing the internet, and out of nowhere we're flooded with annoying spam emails. Some of these have dangerous links that try to steal our personal and bank information. This is where NordVPN comes in to save the day. With their threat protection feature, you can identify potentially harmful links. Even if you do visit a suspicious website, NordVPN's data encryption tools would protect you and your information against a number of different types of attacks such as malware. In the event that your information has been breached, NordVPN's dark web monitoring is constantly on the lookout to see if your personal details have been leaked and will notify you if something has gone wrong. So if you want to be comprehensively protected when you're surfing the internet, sign up to the 2-year plan and get 4 months free by visiting nordvpn.com/hikmahhistory or click the link below in the description.
Throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, Afghanistan was divided between the Safavid Persians in the west and the Mughals of India in the east, with the Uzbek Khanate of Bukhara oftentimes intervening in the north. These imperial powers sometimes found it problematic to exert their authority on the region. This was especially the case with the Safavids and the Mughals. Above all other groups, both powers had particular issues with the Pashtuns, an ethnic group that dominate the border region between modern-day Afghanistan and Pakistan. The Pashtuns were renowned for their warrior-like reputation that was congruent with the rugged and mountainous terrain they inhabited. Interestingly, throughout history, the term Pashtun has been used interchangeably with Afghan, as they meant the same thing. Of course, today, the term Afghan is a much more inclusive one that refers to the people of all tribes and ethnicities within Afghanistan. But this is actually where you get the name for the country, because at least in the last 500 years or so, the Pashtuns have been the dominant ethnic group in the region politically and demographically. Throughout this video, I'll often be using the terms Afghan and Pashtun interchangeably. The first half of the 18th century is pivotal for understanding the historical development of India, Persia, and Afghanistan for the next 150 years. Both the Safavids in Persia and the Mughals in India were in a state of decline by the beginning of the 1700s. In the west, taking advantage of Safavid weakness, Mirwais Hutak, a chieftain of the Ghilzai Pashtun tribe, took control of Kandahar and the surrounding regions in 1709. By 1722, the Hutak Empire extended over much of Persia as well, as the Safavid capital of Esfahan fell to a siege by the Afghans. The empire of Shah Ismail Safavi was effectively dead after this point. The Hutaks even defeated an Ottoman army that invaded Persia with the aim of restoring their erstwhile Safavid arch-rivals. It was precisely this chaotic state of affairs that gave rise to the man described as the Asian Napoleon, or better yet, the last great Asian conqueror, Nader Shah Afshar. He would be the man to bring an end to the short-lived Afghan rule over Persia when in 1729 he forced the Hutaks to retreat to their homeland in southern Afghanistan. Another Pashtun tribe that Nader initially had problems with were the Abdalis of Herat. After he subjugated this tribe in the early 1730s, he actually started recruiting them for his army. This tribe is particularly important for us because the protagonist of our story, Ahmad Shah Durrani, hailed from this tribe. Born in 1722, there's actually some debate whether Ahmad Khan Abdali, as he was originally known as, was born in Herat or Multan in the Punjab. His father, Zaman Khan, was the chief of the Abdali tribe and was the governor of Herat, but died in the same year that his son was born in. In any case, Ahmad Khan was a political prisoner in Kandahar at the time when Nader Shah conquered the city from the Hutaks in 1738. The young Ahmad Khan and his brother immediately entered the Iranian conqueror's service, well placed to join their fellow Abdali tribesmen who already formed a key contingent of Nader's forces as cavalry. Ahmad Khan would accompany Nader in his military campaigns, becoming close to the Shah over time. The young Afghan served various roles, including personal attendant to the Shah himself, leader of a cavalry regiment of his fellow Abdali tribesmen within the Afsharid army, and finally the pivotal position of treasury officer. In this time, there are stories that speak of how prominent members of the period were highly impressed with Ahmad Khan Abdali. The famous Mughal courtier Asaf Jah Nizam al-Mulk was said to have commented that the young Afghan had signs of greatness, and Pashtun legend notes that Nader Shah himself believed kingship would pass on to Ahmad Khan after his own death. All this integral experience allowed him to be in a very advantageous position when his patron, Nader Shah, was assassinated by his own guards in his tent in 1747. Before the whole army camp found out about their leader's death, Ahmad Khan was able to take Nader Shah's royal seal and the famed Kohinoor diamond along with him as he rode back to Kandahar with his regiment of Abdali tribesmen. According to Afghan legend, a Jargah, the Afghan equivalent of a Shura where an assembly of tribal leaders get together to decide a matter, was held at Shiri Surkh near Kandahar in order to decide the next leader of the Afghans. After seeing no headway being made, a Sufi dervish by the name of Sabir Shah got up and placed a cluster of wheat on the head of the young Ahmad Khan and said to the tribal leaders, "That's your king." The Sufi dervish said Ahmad Khan had the appearance of a king, and apparently all the tribal chieftains agreed and unanimously elected him to be their king. If that story sounds more like fairy tale than truth, that's because it likely is. Let's not forget Ahmad Khan had a battle-hardened regiment of cavalry soldiers to support him. You'd be forgiven for assuming that mattered more than the decision of a Sufi dervish. But let's also not be so quick to ridicule legends and fairy tales. They tell us more about cultures and peoples than we imagine. For the Afghans, it shows us how much they value democratic ideals that they are literally embedded into the very heart of their national birth story. Whether Ahmad Khan was elected or if his material assets decided the day almost doesn't matter. The fact that the Afghans highlight and triumph the electoral element of the narrative tells us about their cultural ideals. And that is a very powerful message to take away from history. But I digress. Proclaiming himself Shah in July 1747, the young king took on the title of Dur-i-Duran, Pearl of Pearls. Hence, from that moment on, the name of his tribe Abdali was changed to Durrani, and he would be known as Ahmad Shah Durrani. Sometimes history can be more exciting than a movie. Upon his way to Kandahar, Ahmad Shah stopped a caravan destined to Persia laden with booty and treasure from India. This was the perfect start to his reign, as he could use that money to strengthen the foundations of his royal authority. Establishing his capital at Kandahar, Ahmad Shah sought to capitalize on the chaos that had been unleashed in Nader Shah's empire in the aftermath of the great conqueror's death. The organization of his power was based on a tribal feudal system where he'd rule with the tribal chiefs as his advisors. In turn, they'd furnish him with soldiers for his campaigns and he would pay them fixed amounts. In a sense, he was the chief of chiefs. This was strategically a smart and effective method of ruling because the Afghan tribes have throughout history been known to be exceptionally rebellious, especially against the interference of central governance. So Ahmad Shah ruled the tribes and ethnicities through their respective tribal chiefs. It should be mentioned that whilst the Pashtun tribesmen were the bedrock of his army, his conception of a state was a multi-ethnic one. His administrators prominently included the Shia Qizilbash, his regional governors included the Shia Hazara, and his army would recruit the Baloch and Turkic peoples, whilst his wives included Mughal Indians. Wars and conquests were intimately tied to his control of the tribes. It allowed Ahmad Shah to channel the tribes' energies in a positive direction, whilst at the same time enlarging his reputation and wealth, thereby further solidifying his position as chief of chiefs, and even inducing other tribes to join him in the hope of plunder. Subsequently, he could use the wealth gained from conquests to placate tribal leaders and reward his soldiers and thereby reinforce the loyalty of those around him. With this rationale in mind, Ahmad Shah Durrani immediately set out after being crowned to start an epic 25 years of conquest and campaigns. The historic and strategically important cities of Ghazni, Kabul and Peshawar were captured in 1747. Moving further south on his trail of conquest, Ahmad Shah made the first of his 8 invasions of Hindustan. Pre-modern India included modern-day Pakistani provinces such as Punjab and Sindh. From Peshawar, he crossed the Indus River and seized the rich city of Lahore, once the capital of the Mughal Empire and the main city of the Punjab. Hearing of the Afghan advance upon India, the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah dispatched an army to meet him. At the Battle of Manipur in 1748, Ahmad Shah was decisively defeated by the Mughals and forced to retreat back to Afghanistan with the loot he had secured from Lahore. Not disheartened, Ahmad Shah invaded India again the very next year. This time, lack of support from Delhi prevented the Mughal governor of Punjab to make a worthy stand against the Afghans. Instead, favouring to settle matters peacefully, a treaty was signed which gave Ahmad Shah control of territories to the west of the Indus River, as well as annual tribute from certain Mughal territories. This treaty was in many ways a reiteration of the agreement between Nader Shah and the Mughals, something that was important to Ahmad Shah because he saw himself in some ways to be a successor to the great Persian Turkic conqueror. In this vein, his next campaign in the same year would be to take his home city of Herat, which was at the time ruled by an Afsharid governor. After a siege that lasted for almost a year, Herat fell to the Durrani forces. Ahmad Shah put Darwish Ali Khan, a Hazara, as governor of the city. Feeling secure enough with his eastern frontier with the Mughals, Ahmad Shah continued his conquests westward, moving deeper into the region of Khorasan. Capturing Mashhad, held by Nader Shah's grandson Shah Rukh, Ahmad Shah allowed the young blind ruler to remain in charge of the city, but in return for tribute and Afghan suzerainty over the region. After failing to take the city of Nishapur on the first go, Ahmad Shah returned the next year in 1751 and with the help of heavier artillery, laid a successful siege, going on to sack the historic city. With eastern Persia being reduced to vassalage, Ahmad Shah ordered Shah Wali Khan, a key minister, to subdue the Uzbek and Hazara principalities in the direction of the Amudarya, or the Oxus as it's known in Latin. Shah Wali was able to bring Balkh, Badakhshan, Shebarghan, Maymana and Andukoi to submission, earning himself the title of Sadr-Azam or Prime Minister. In the meantime, the Mughal governor of Punjab had not paid the Durranis the agreed tribute. Considering Ahmad Shah relied upon northern India to financially fund his military campaigns and state building, he could not afford to let this affront to his authority slide. So he invaded India for a third time in 1752, this time annexing Multan, Lahore and Kashmir to be a part of the Durrani Empire. As energetic and dynamic of a leader Ahmad Shah was, his success in the Punjab was determined by a weakened Mughal empire. The glory days of the Mughals were long gone, and they were now just a mere shadow of their former selves. Court intrigues played a big role in this downfall. During the 1750s, the Vizier Imad al-Mulk was the de facto ruler in Delhi. He had allied himself with the Mughals' biggest foes on the subcontinent, the Marathas. A Hindu confederacy that began in western India, the Marathas had become the most powerful force in India by the 1750s. It's within this context that in 1756, Ahmad Shah Durrani was invited by the Mughal Emperor Alamgir II and a key vizier of his, the Pashtun Najib ad-Dawla, to march on Delhi and remove Imad al-Mulk. Attracted by the wealth of the Mughal court, Ahmad Shah invaded India for the fourth time early in 1757. He entered the Mughal capital Delhi virtually unopposed and had his name read in the khutbah or sermons for Friday prayers. He profited from this particular invasion immensely, as the reparations exacted on the Mughal treasury as well as the wealthy inhabitants of Delhi were enormous. In addition, he married his son Timur Mirza to the daughter of the Mughal emperor, whilst marrying the daughter of an ex-Mughal emperor himself. This would be the second Mughal princess Ahmad Shah took as a wife. He left Imad al-Mulk as the prime minister, but put Najib ad-Dawla, his fellow Afghan, in de facto control in Delhi. Upon his return to Afghanistan, Ahmad Shah was constantly harassed by the nascent Sikhs who had taken refuge in the hills and forests of the Punjab. In the next decade or so, they'd become a real nuisance for the Afghans in the region. He would leave his young son Timur in charge of the Punjab under the watchful eye of Jahan Khan, a key minister of his. Back in Delhi, the Marathas had recovered their supremacy over the Mughals as soon as Ahmad Shah had left. They then marched northwards towards the Punjab, aiming to kick the Afghans out. Allying themselves with the Sikhs, they successfully captured Lahore. In fact, they would pursue the Afghans all the way to Peshawar in 1758. After dealing with a rebellion from the Baloch Khan of Kalat, Ahmad Shah made plans to meet the Maratha threat and march on India towards the end of 1759. For the next year, throughout 1760, Ahmad Shah and the Marathas prepared themselves for the oncoming conflict by trying to draw nobles across northern India to their sides. At the start of the very next year, in January 1761, the Afghans and the Marathas fought at the decisive Third Battle of Panipat. The battle was fiercely contested and resulted in a huge loss of life on both sides. But in the end, the Afghans emerged victorious. Above all, they were helped by their use of the Jazail muskets, as well as their cavalry, and last but not least, the Zamburak, a mounted artillery which had small cannon placed on top of a camel. At this point, Ahmad Shah was in a very advantageous position, and some may question why he didn't press that advantage further by conquering Delhi as part of his domain. In addition to the realities of him being far from his support base in Afghanistan, Ahmad Shah's main aim had been to decisively make the Punjab his own. With the Maratha threat to the Punjab gone, he had no reason to stick around in India. However, he still had to contest with another opponent for supremacy in the region, the Sikhs. Ahmad Shah would invade India 3 more times. Each time he was solely preoccupied by the combative Sikhs. They were a fairly new religious community that had been persecuted and had subsequently developed a militant communal bond that made them incredibly difficult to suppress, despite their small numbers. The Afghans would gradually lose control of the Punjab to the Sikhs throughout the 1760s. Finding it tough to get the Sikhs to abandon their guerrilla tactics and have a pitched battle, Ahmad Shah even resorted to desecrating their holy monuments and massacring their communities. Sikhs to this day remember something known as the Vada Ghalu Gara, or the Great Massacre, which was when Ahmad Shah killed up to 30,000 of their co-religionists, many of them non-combatants, in 1762. But all this simply emboldened the Sikhs, who would avoid fighting when Ahmad Shah personally invaded the Punjab and then resumed their military activities once he left for Afghanistan. In fact, by the end of his reign, most of the Punjab was controlled by the Sikhs. One interesting thing to note is that the British were expanding their power in India at this time, and they were particularly wary of Ahmad Shah in the aftermath of his victory at Panipat. When the Afghan king marched in the direction of Delhi in 1767, the British told some of his former allies like the Mughal emperor to not give him money and even oppose him. Nothing would come of this potential confrontation. The British and Afghans would eventually be embroiled in numerous wars in the following centuries. By the early 1770s, it was clear that Ahmad Shah's health was rapidly deteriorating. As well as potentially suffering from diabetes, he had an ulcer on his nose that was literally eating his face, even being compelled to wear an artificial nose made of silver. Towards the end, it is said that his speech was incomprehensible. In his peak, he was perhaps the last great assertive Muslim ruler before the onset of European imperialism's dominance. Through his conquests, he was able to acquire wealth and resources which allowed him to set up a tribal state of sorts. As well as being a militarily vigorous man, he had the soft skills required to deal with the people whom he ruled. In the process, perhaps unknowingly, he set up the basis for an Afghan state that was inherently diverse in its range of ethnicities and customs. And for his efforts, he is known by Afghans as Ahmad Shah Baba, father of Afghanistan. His love for his nation was immortalized in his poetry, the most famous of which reads as follows: Sta de ishq lwinor dak sol zegruna, sta pelara kahi bayali zalmisaruna, تا تر اعظمه زړګی زما فارغ سي بې له تا مې اندېښنې د زړه مارونه که هر څو مې د دنیا ملکونه ډېر سي زما به هېر نسي ستا ښکلي باغونه د ډیلي تخت هېرومه چې رایاد کړم زما د ښکلي پښتونخوا د غرو سرونه د فرید او د حمید دور به بیا سي چې زه وکندم پر هر لوري تاختونه که تمامه دنیا یو خوا ته بل خوا یې زما خوښ دی ستا ښکلي تشنډه ګرونه. In late 1772, in a mountain retreat east of Kandahar, Ahmad Shah would pass away. He had named his son Timur Mirza as his preferred successor, but he must have known that things would not go as smoothly as he had hoped for. Like many early modern empires, Ahmad Shah's kingdom was a fragile one. Punjab, with its rich revenues, had almost entirely been lost to the independent confederations of the Sikhs, even in Ahmad Shah's last years. The empire's structure was also highly personal and dependent on Ahmad Shah's relationships with the many nobles, vassal rulers, and other subjects he ruled. The terms of succession resembled the Turkic and Mongol traditions, with no single official heir. Therefore, the different princes who were appointed to govern large territories could expect to fight it out when the Shah died. This system did favor the rise of an experienced, capable, and well-connected prince, but it could make succession violent and unpredictable. When Ahmad Shah died, it was first kept a secret for some time. The royal entourage travelled towards Kandahar, where another prince, Suleiman, was governor. When Suleiman went to greet his father, the cat was out of the bag. Ahmad Shah's body was conducted mournfully into the city. His former vizier, Shah Wali Khan, supported Suleiman as successor to the empire. But the now deceased Shah had named his eldest son Timur Mirza, who governed Herat, his preferred successor. Upon hearing of his father's death, Timur Mirza left Herat to pay respects to his father, but with the obvious underlying reason being to win the kingship for himself. With the backing of several leading Durrani nobles, he was able to defeat his brother Suleiman. An especially important ally was Painda Khan of the Barakzai clan. He and his clan will be essential to remember because his family would play an increasingly powerful role in Afghan history over the coming decades. Shah Wali Khan was put to death for supporting Suleiman, and upon entering Kandahar, the new emperor took the throne as Timur Shah. Coins were struck and the khutbah read in his name. Timur Shah is usually viewed as having less energy for warfare or statecraft than his father, and more for arts and pleasures. Especially in colonial British sources, he is referred to as weaker and more indolent. His greater association with Persian speakers and Persian courtly culture ties in with this, as it is juxtaposed with the martial Pashtun tribal power wielded by his father. After one of Ahmad Shah's campaigns in India, Timur had married a Mughal princess, and the importation of Mughal higher culture was likely another source of influence behind this. It is also true that he never achieved the kinds of spectacular military campaigns his father had. His armies never reached past Lahore into the rest of Hindustan, and he added no new provinces to the empire. Poetry was certainly active in his court, though it had also been under Ahmad Shah. Poetry gatherings were held, especially in appreciation of the work of Bedil, the 17th century Indian poet whose Persian verses are much loved in Afghanistan to this day. In his courtly circle, there was at least one poetess, his wife Aisha Durrani. Women actively participated in poetry during this period. Ahmad Shah Durrani's mother Zarghuna Ana was a noted poetess, as was Nazo Tukhi, the mother of Mirwais Hutak. Timur Shah also has a collection of Pashto poems credited to him, but its authenticity and even his proficiency in Pashto is not fully agreed upon by scholars. Timur Shah's style was also more ceremonial than his father's. Observers of Ahmad Shah's camps and army had noted its discipline and stripped down character, little fanfare or pomp, no ostentatious elephant riding like the Mughal nobility. Timur Shah took to riding an elephant as a sign of royalty, and in the words of the early 20th century Afghan court historian Faiz Muhammad Khatib Hazara, he modelled his government on that of the great rulers. He wore a diamond-studded brooch on his turban and a bejeweled sash over his shoulder. His overcoat was ornamented with precious stones, and he wore the Kohinoor diamond on his right forearm and the Fakhraj ruby on his left. Ahmad Shah had been an officer first and had become an emperor, but his descendants were born royal and were able to look back to their forefather as a source of legitimacy. Nevertheless, Timur Shah was no absentee king. He did mount successful campaigns in the Punjab, notably retaking the city of Multan from Sikh forces in a large battle in 1780. He also checked the advance of the Emir of Bukhara, re-establishing the boundary between the two kingdoms as it had been under Ahmad Shah. His forces also defeated several rebellions. More research needs to be done on Durrani administrative and economic activities, but we know that in Peshawar, his winter residence, he created a large royal canal and added quarters to the great Balahisar fortress. He also went on to expand and embellish Kabul. Kabul is key to the story of the Durranis after Ahmad Shah. In 1780, Timur Shah moved the capital of the empire from Kandahar to this smaller city, making Kabul the center of the Afghan political landscape, which of course still holds today. The move to Kabul is usually ascribed to Timur Shah wanting to get away from the power base of the Durrani nobility, whose fiefs were concentrated at Kandahar. He had a messy relationship with the Durrani and other Pashtun chiefs. In around 1779 in Peshawar, a local chief of the Khalil clan orchestrated a coup attempt in favor of Timur Shah's son. Under pretense of mustering troops for an attack on Punjab, a large force was gathered and attacked the Balahisar fort while the Shah slept. Royal troops beat back the attack, but Timur Shah was unable to punish one of the suspected conspirators, a respected Sufi from the village of Chamkani, because the Afghan nobles intervened. It was this contentious relationship that ties into Timur Shah's image as a Persian-inclined ruler. He seemed to put more stock in the troops and attendance of his own household and the Persian-speaking Shia Qizilbash troops and administrators than the Pashtun nobility. For all the difficulties he faced, Timur Shah held the kingdom together for 20 years until 1793. He didn't expand it, but he kept it mostly stable and was able to manage its dangerous and complex dynamics. He died, peacefully but seemingly of an illness, en route from Peshawar back to his capital at Kabul. His own successor wouldn't be so lucky. Ahmad Shah had had 6 sons, but Timur Shah fathered anywhere between 22 and 30, or maybe even more than that. Only a few were serious contenders for power though: the eldest Humayun, governor of Kandahar, Mahmud, the governor of Herat, Abbas, the former governor of Peshawar, and Zaman, who governed the capital Kabul. Of these, only the last 2 were at the capital when the Shah died. Most of the Durrani leaders, including the same Painda Khan who had sided with Timur Shah in 1773, settled on Zaman, barricading Abbas in his house with all the other princes. The roughly 23-year-old Zaman became Zaman Shah. For some time, Zaman Shah managed to build up his power successfully. His brother Humayun contested the kingship and managed to score some victories, but was eventually beaten, blinded, and imprisoned in Kabul with his brothers. Mahmud, the other prince, agreed to acknowledge Zaman Shah without a fight initially, and when he did take the field, he was beaten several times. Threats from Bukhara in the north were handled, as was a rebellion in Kashmir. Durrani troops installed a friendly ruler in Baluchistan and kept the Durrani vassal ruler of Mashhad in Iran from being deposed. The new Shah was a lot more energetic militarily than his father and seemed intent on invading the Punjab and then Hindustan in the footsteps of his grandfather. Zaman Shah also took on building projects in Kabul, adding to its luster as a capital city. He expanded and added to the great royal castle called the Balahisar, just like the one at Peshawar. It seems that under his reign, the city gained a greater reputation for many lovely gardens. He also built fine palaces, gazebos, continued or started work on mosques, and even worked on the historic Shor Bazar market. A key partner in this was Jan Nisar Khan, a Tajik of a modest background who was raised to high office and managed Kabul. But there were serious underlying problems. His brother Mahmud, battered though he was a constant headache for Zaman Shah. The Qajars of Iran took Mahmud in and were happy for him to disrupt Durrani affairs, giving him troops and support. They themselves wanted to retake most of the Afghan kingdom, which they saw as historically Iranian territory. Keen to keep Zaman Shah away from India, Britain and its East India Company encouraged the Qajars to continue interfering, though they didn't need much convincing. Whenever Zaman Shah would enter Punjab, the Qajars or Mahmud's attacks would drag him back west. The Punjab invasions were also fruitless. Although Zaman Shah was able to take Lahore and force various Muslim, Hindu and Sikh local leaders to submit to him, no real Durrani government took shape in these brief excursions, and though he levied extremely harsh taxes in Lahore, in the end not much loot was to be had to keep the army paid. As Zaman Shah marched here and there to keep the empire together, his vizier Wafadar Khan built his own power. He was apparently unpopular with the other Afghan nobles, who were also worried about the eroding impact Zaman Shah's efforts to centralize power had on tribal power, as he seemingly sought to abolish their hereditary positions in the state. Painda Khan Barakzai and others conspired to depose the Shah and replace him with his brother Shuja al-Mulk. The vizier and Shah were tipped off and had a number of nobles, including Painda Khan, killed in 1800. By itself, Zaman Shah might have weathered the fallout from killing so many leading men, but its treasury was depleted and Mahmud was at large. Painda Khan's capable son Fateh Khan had also escaped the massacre and joined Mahmud. As Zaman Shah scrounged together an army to attack Punjab again, Mahmud and Fateh Khan gathered support and seized most of the empire from the west. Eventually, in the summer of 1801, they defeated Zaman Shah, who was captured and blinded. He had ruled for around 8 years and was only in his early 30s. The empire would totter on for some time until fracturing for good after 1818, but Zaman Shah was the last Durrani ruler to project any power across most of Ahmad Shah's old domain, from eastern Iran to Lahore. Mahmud Shah would barely have time to enjoy his new kingship. Within 2 years, he had been driven out by his younger brother, Shah Shuja al-Mulk. Shah Shuja ruled uneasily until 1809. Just like under Zaman Shah, Mahmud and the Qajars were still a looming threat in the west. In Punjab to the east, a powerful Sikh kingdom under Maharaja Ranjit Singh was the preeminent military power. Beyond was the British East India Company, now the most powerful state in South Asia. They had worked to keep Zaman Shah away from India. Now they sent an embassy to Shuja in 1808 and 1809 to build friendly ties, concerned about other possible enemies like Russia. Unbeknownst to the Afghans, the great game rivalry between Britain and Russia had commenced. Almost immediately after this British embassy, Shuja lost his throne to a resurgent Mahmud. This began a lifetime of exile and desperate attempts to retake the kingdom for Shuja. For Mahmud, 9 years of rule began. But it was Fateh Khan Barakzai, the son of Painda Khan and now the chief vizier, who seemed to manage most state affairs. On one level, what remained of the empire was just about holding together. In the east, the boundary with Ranjit Singh's state more or less held, and the two sides even cooperated on occasion. In the west, the Qajars did not manage to push to Herat as they hoped. On another level, Fateh Khan set the stage for the realm to splinter. Of special consequence was the fact that his many brothers and half-brothers were appointed to important provinces, where they built up their own power bases. Eventually, Fateh Khan's great power provoked an extreme reaction from Mahmud's son, Prince Kamran. Soon after a battle with the Qajar armies near Herat, Kamran had the vizier tortured and murdered. When Zaman Shah had killed Painda Khan, Fateh Khan was able to turn to Mahmud and his Persian hosts to depose him. After Fateh Khan's murder, the Barakzais as a whole took a far more leading role in driving out Mahmud and taking control. Mahmud's second reign ended in 1818, but he and Kamran managed to hold on to Herat until 1842. In the rest of the provinces, the Barakzai brothers continued to run their own affairs. But they kept up what historian Christine Noel Karimi calls a precarious equilibrium, with each other under a leading brother, Muhammad Azim Khan. Puppet Durrani kings were also seen as a necessity, with the most notable being Ayub Shah, who was crowned in Peshawar. The equilibrium ended in 1823. Muhammad Azim Khan died shortly after suffering a major defeat against the Sikh armies at Naushera east of Peshawar, a battle which opened up the city to eventual Sikh occupation. Infighting among the Barakzai brothers, each in their own principality, heightened. Kabul, the capital, was the prize. In the end, the conflict reached such a pitch that the pretense of Durrani rule was disposed of. Ayub Shah's son was strangled and he imprisoned by the rulers of Kandahar. The Durrani Empire was truly dead. Out of the Barakzai fraternal struggles of the 1820s came the rise of the famous Dost Muhammad Khan, the reimagining of the Durrani Empire as an emirate, and the famous Anglo-Afghan War of 1839 to 1842. Much had changed since Timur Shah took the throne in 1773. Indeed, so much had changed even since Zaman Shah's reign. Unlike his father, Zaman lived through it all. And maybe more than any of the Durrani kings of Ahmad Shah's line, Zaman Shah experienced the highs and lows of trying to wield power in a dangerous and rapidly changing world. After being deposed, blinded, and moved around South Asia, he became a permanent pensioner of the British in India. By then, as he wrote to a British officer, he spent more time contemplating the Quran than thinking about the business of empire. In the meantime, the world had transformed. When Zaman Shah took the throne, he had been the emperor of what still could be a powerful state, bordered by other expanding or powerful Asian polities. The elites of his world mostly used the Persian language and drew on common cultural reference points. By the end of his life in 1845, however, he was a humble dependent in a world where European empires were increasingly calling the shots, and the era of modern colonialism was about to begin. Thank you guys for watching. As usual, a big thank you to my patrons for continuing to support the channel. Until next time, peace!